Pretty low.
One thing that's worth noting here, I want to go back and take a look at that. Look at the vowel. The vowel gets bright.
Pretty low.
So when you go with a brighter vowel when you're going down there, it actually helps you project a little bit more. So the way that a spectrogram works. So the way that a spectrogram works is that on this side right here, we have the frequencies, right? Lower frequencies are lower. And then the lines here that are blue, the brightness denotes how loud those frequencies are. So if I go, what you're seeing there is just the lower frequencies getting highlighted. Now watch what happens when I brighten that vowel. Definitely there's a lot more of those higher frequencies present. Now, the human ear is tuned in such a way that those higher frequencies are way louder. I'm not just talking about a couple of little bits of volume knob. I'm talking about exponential. We're talking decibels. Those higher frequencies are way more audible. And so when you're trying to project on that low end, that higher, those higher frequencies from the brighter vowel, that's what you want. And that's what she's doing, even though it's in the basement for her and that note kind of disappears. That's what she's going about to try and handle it.
Low.
So she just kind of lets it go. Folks talk about Mariah having a bad low end. Sometimes just notes are not there, and I don't understand. It shouldn't be like, of all the things about Mariah Carey, it seems like a weak argument to be like, well, her low notes on A2 are not very present. I'm like, yeah, but like, really, that's your takeaway? You listen to Mariah Carey and like, oh, A2. All right. Well, we're here in the basement, though, and I think we're going to find different approaches from each singer, so let's continue. This I love. So what I love is she just, as she goes down in that phrase, she just lets it go. The phrase ends. What she is doing there before she goes down to the basement is she is using two tricks here. Again, we're going to go back to the spectrogram, but first let's talk about those two tricks. One, she is elongating the vocal tract by pursing her lips. Ooh, right? She was kind of doing that mouth shape a little bit. And in doing that, she gets that brighter vowel, but she also can elongate the vocal tract, which will absolutely give resonance to those lower frequencies the same way that a violin doesn't highlight as low a frequency as a cello, because the cello is bigger. When you elongate your vocal tract by pursing your lips, you will have higher frequencies. Also, there is something called the proximity effect. As you go closer to a microphone, you can see that the lower frequencies are way more present. I actually have to speak very softly because the mic is clipping. Let's take a look at the spectrogram so you can actually see both of these effects. Now, it's a little hard to see if I could get my finger to not disappear. These are getting a little brighter and quieter. These frequencies right here, very difficult to see. Let me see if I can boost the contrast of the spectrogram so we can get a better look. Now, to compensate for the fact that these, the contrast and the colors are not very bright, I've actually turned on what is called the resonance tracker. Now you can see that I extended the vocal tract at the end there, and actually there's more resonance in a little bit of a higher frequency, which I find interesting. You can also see that the resonance on the lower end descends a little bit over here. Let's take a listen to that. Very interesting. I want to take another look at that. You can kind of hear it, right? So she's got tricks, and these are helpful little things that you can implement. Let's continue. See, you can totally see the same trick right there.
Tender love's what you're giving me. Yeah. See, I believe in miracles because I'm.
What I love here too is that she's not pretending that low note is there. She is going down the phrase and she is just letting the phrase disappear, and that's an aesthetic. You might not like it. I kind of like it. It's a choice, and it's valid. It's an artistic choice. You have a phrase that just kind of vanishes at the end. This is not the range that we know Mariah Carey for. She is trying very hard. So one of the things that people do that I don't think is a good idea is they lower their larynx, they force their larynx down by bringing their tongue back. Now that sounds louder to you because of the way that the skull works and that there's bone conduction. Your skull will resonate near your ear canal. And so when you do that, it sounds louder to you, but to other people, it does not. Let me show you the example on the spectrogram. So you'll see it right here. Ooh, there's a noticeable increase in the resonance when I don't do that. However, she's not lowering her larynx by bringing her tongue back. She is doing what is called a thyroid cartilage tilt. So that's going to sound like this. This is without the tilt. And that is it's not very loud because I'm not a large voice. But by tilting the larynx in that way, I am able to lower my larynx. This is, we're going to get into the anatomy of this right now. So this right here is your thyroid cartilage. And these right here are your vocal folds. They connect to the thyroid cartilage. Now, these muscles right here are the cricoid thyroid muscles, the cricothyroid muscles. And those allow the larynx to tilt, the thyroid cartilage specifically. When the cricothyroid muscles contract, the thyroid cartilage tilts this way. And given that the vocal folds are connected to the thyroid cartilage, as seen right here, what'll happen is that the folds stretch. Now, when you go up, there are implications for that. But right now, for our low notes, if we are able to do that, we elongate the vocal tract, and that allows us to have more resonance in the low end. So that's what she's doing right there. Can't help if you have certain notes or not. There are limits to your anatomy, depending on the person. This is not about voice type. Voice types are for people who are doing the auditioning. My favorite phrase is, your voice type is whatever you get paid to do. You have what God gave you, and so you learn different techniques to interrupt my videos. How rude. He's adorable, so we forgive it. But you learn these tricks to get a little bit more out of your voice. Now we're getting into Whitney, and that is way louder. So these are going to be Whitney's low notes. We're going to hear something completely different. I'm talking about that old school. So what she did there is a vocal fry. So I'll show you what the difference between a vocal fry and just your lower notes are. It's actually, I love this stuff. So if I just hit a low note, because I'm not limited to the oscillation of the vocal folds, I have so much more that I can do if I have a vocal fry. One, we're getting a little air leakage, but also we're getting a little bit more percussive with the folds. They're rattling, which can lead to vocal fatigue. Vocal fry is something that you should use sparingly, but there are a lot of extended techniques that you can use vocal fries for. A very popular one is what beatboxers use. This is often called throat bass, also Mongolian throat singing. Those are vocal fries, and I'm just adjusting my vocal track to maximize the resonance.
Guess I wasn't too bright.
That's a nice way to add a little power. That's called a glottal. That thing she did where it's like you're coughing a little bit. Now, the vocal folds are a sphincter, so they are very much meant to close. So in this instance, the vocal folds come together and they stay together as the breath pressure builds up. Now, to make sense of a glottal, we're going to use a different tool here. This is Audacity. It's actually free. When I gradually bring the folds together, you see there's that triangle shape right here. There's that easing of the listen, someone's compensating. Someone just made a really clever joke. They said the vroom is easing. But we're talking about the vocal folds, so let's take a little bit of a better look. This is the vocal folds coming together right here, but they're not holding together, they're oscillating. Now, a glottal is when they're like this, and the breath pressure builds up behind it, and then you get an opening. And so that actually helps project the lower notes. Generally speaking, glottals are not, they kind of tire your voice out a little bit. They're not something to be avoided, but they're just a little tiring, so you don't want to use it too much. So by building up that pressure, we get an increase of what's called sound pressure level, SPL, and that is what we generally consider volume. A really good little metric for measuring volume in a little bit more of a subtle way than decibels, so that's a cool little trick. We're getting a lot of very different approaches from the two of them.
Waiting for someone.
Almost a cough.
What is she telling you? My own strength. Hard.
Now that's interesting. We're getting that brighter vowel and a tilt. So it's not as low in her range as it was for Mariah when she was doing it, but it's just an example of how you can use these different things. Really cool. Eating the microphone. That's the proximity effect right there. She's just right up on it. Same thing. And again, that thyroid cartilage tilt. That's where that vibrato comes from. So vibrato comes from that thyroid cartilage tilt that we were talking about, except for when the tilt gets to a certain point, you get these instabilities because these muscles are not very strong. They're not very big. They're smaller than the vocal folds themselves. And so that tautness that happens can create that instability, and that creates vibrato. There we go. That tilting right there. Now we're getting into the mids. We're gonna get into the mids of Mariah and then the mids of Whitney, and we're gonna see what the differences are. We did the low video. We went over their low end, and each used different techniques to project their low end. Sometimes they overlapped in terms of the technique, but it was incredible the differences they used. So let's go into the mids and find out how they go about approaching their mids. Okay, we're still a little bit below here. It's really interesting that it's breathy on this. Really interesting. That's a hell of a run. Okay, that went down in the basement. So the reason why it's really interesting that it goes into this breathiness, because when we covered her lows in the last video, her breathiness was not that prominent. When you do low notes, you are putting more air through the vocal folds because of what's called the Bernoulli effect. So the Bernoulli effect is what happens when you blow air through the vocal folds. They come together, which is interesting. You wouldn't think that. But what happens is as you're blowing the air through, the pressure on the outside is greater than the pressure on the inside. And so you get this. As he says as he gets cut off. Here we go. Now, as you go lower, you actually want more air because you want the folds to come together thicker, because lower notes require more sound pressure level. You need that the lower frequencies are literally larger. Quite literally, waves and frequencies have a size to them. Lower notes require more size. That's why when you go to a concert, subwoofers are larger and you can see them move. The same idea is true here, but definitely to a lesser extent. So that's why it's interesting why she's getting breathy sounds, because you would need a lot of more vocal closure and a lot more sound and air to come through for these lower notes. And so she's doing something that intentionally keeps the vocal folds apart. So I think that's pretty interesting. But because it's breathy, you do get more of those upper frequencies. Again, let's go to the spectrogram. So I fibbed about the spectrogram because I want to see what's going on here. It looks like because she's doing these higher runs that start higher, the inverse is true of what I talked about with lower notes needing more air. Higher notes need less air, not to be confused with less support. Lungs are like a plastic bag, and so it's really all of this chicanery and boulder dash around the torso that allows you to control how much exhale is happening, thus how much air is coming out. And it is in doing that with the torso where you have posture, where your rib cage is expanded, where you're trying not to be very tight like I am right now, tight in fact like a tiger. So I'm going to show you a low note. I'm going to do a slide up there, but I'm not going to add any support. Expand my rib cage. I'm not going to adjust my posture. And you're going to tell that it gets a little faint. There's a limit to this. I had my volume a little low. You can hear as I do that slide when I'm not using any support. I'm not adjusting my posture. My rib cage does not expand. So that breath pressure that I need for the lower notes is going up with these higher notes, and so the higher notes are not working. But watch what happens as I adjust my posture, expand my rib cage as I go up. Now, if I'm going up and I'm up here, the other trick I can do to make sure that there's less air coming out of my face hole is to take a smaller inhale. So that's what she did there. Listen to how quiet she is. That's from a smaller inhale. So as she goes down, there's not enough breath to get the vocal folds together. Back just a hair. See that? She doesn't get up there by doing what I did, which is, big posture, big sound. She got up there by doing a very little inhale. And so there are different ways to do that. In particular, with the smaller inhale, you should listen to Yeba. If you don't know who that is, that's the person you want to look at when you're looking at smaller inhales. She and Ariana Grande also does that. So there's a lot of ways to do these things. And we're looking at two very brilliant singers. And so they're using so many different things to get these sounds, different techniques. It's interesting that note that she did before, her tongue was going back a little bit, and that created that sort of weird swallowed sound. And in the next note, she knew it. She knew it, and the next note, she adjusted it because he knows. She knows. Mariah knows. So the other thing too that we're getting here is that when these higher notes are happening, she's also moving the folds very quickly. And in order to get runs that are that fast, you need folds that are very thin. And so you need very little breath. If I try to do Rossini, max volume, you're going to get something like this. So this is going to be big opera voice, lots of breath, right? Now, if I do it lighter, I'm going to get quieter. I'm going to get less volume. Says as the mic levels were too low. I'm going to go up there and I'm going to do a decrescendo. I'm going to make it very quiet, and then I'm going to do that same run again. You're going to hear the difference. I forget the words, but here we go. Definitely a lot faster. And so that's how she's getting those different runs very quick. But then again, you're losing the air necessary to get that robust sound in the low end. But you can't do both. Not at least at that speed. At that speed, it is not enough to have that support. You need that smaller inhale. That's just how you get that speed that she had. Just vanished. Ooh, interesting mic technique. I want to take a look at that. That's interesting. Notice how she puts it to the side there. That's very interesting. I actually don't know why she tilted the mic to the side there. Maybe she wanted a decrescendo and she felt she didn't have control at that low end to have more dynamic control. It's very interesting because it was a very subtle movement, but it did have that effect of the volume kind of going away in a very elegant way. Super intricate mic technique. Very, 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 very specific. Right here. Does that. I want to get that right here. Not there, right here, right here. It's very subtle, right? It's almost hard to see. Really cool. Very nuanced. Oh, that's you. There we go, going up to that. This time that vocal track. We will get to Whitney, don't you? Drifting away. You're drifting away. Now I can make some sort of sassy comment about her singing vanishing and her low notes vanishing, but then I'd have to also eat my own words because as a tenor, my low notes vanish anyway. Been there. I love how comfortable she is on stage. It's really difficult. That's really beautiful. It's pretty. Nice run. Yeah, buddy. All right, now here we go. Now we're getting more into the mids. Now we're getting into Whitney. Now this is a very interesting part of the range. We're getting a lot of volume on a belt is actually not so easy. So this is really cool. She brings it to thyroid cartilage to get that vibrato. This is a really cool technique. And the reason why I think it's so hard and exciting is the way that you belt is actually the opposite of the way. So this is your thyroid cartilage. These are your vocal folds. Notice how they are attached to the thyroid cartilage. So when you want to do vibrato, you tilt them forward. That stretches out the vocal folds. But also notice how vocal folds are larger than these muscles. These muscles are the cricothyroid muscles. They are responsible for tilting the thyroid cartilage in the forward direction. In doing so, because those vocal folds are larger, you end up having this kind of thing happen where there's this little shake and instability, and that's what creates vibrato. Except when we get to belting, it's quite the opposite. When you tilt your thyroid cartilage backwards in this direction, the opposite happens and the vocal folds come together like this, and that's what creates a belt. And so that thing that we love where there's that that with the belt to the vibrato, I'm not a great belter. That wasn't actually a belt, but we're going to pretend for the sake of argument that that's what that was. It wasn't, but that's what that was. We're pretending. That is me having the thyroid cartilage backwards and then bringing it forwards. And so there's this range of motion. And so I think it's really important to be able to do both. But it's noteworthy. If you hear vibrato, it is likely not a belt. There is a way to do it at the same time, but I have yet to run into a lot of examples of that. I think Wagnerian singers are people who use both. It is theorized by some and not others. So. That tone quality is so nice. The reason I'm stunned isn't because hitting these notes, I literally have chills actually. The reason I was like, holy crap, is the sound. The tone quality is tremendous. It's such a good sound. It's so hard to make a good belt, like in terms of it sounding round. It is actually a very special thing to be able to do. And Whitney is one of the few people who I've ever heard who have a lush belt. Reminds me of a little bit. This belt reminds me of Judy Garland. That's the sound color, the quality that it reminds me of. And now we get some belts from Mariah. Turn out to be. I love the vowels. Oh my God, these two singers are so good. It's so good. An embarrassment of riches. Oh my God, I love it. So what we're getting from both singers are different vowels in order to adjust the tone quality, because belts are a little abrasive. That's just bright. That's very Broadway, right? And now watch what happens when we get to the... Oh my gosh, it's so good. Watch what happens when we get the Mariah belt right here. We're gonna get, watch her lips. That's gonna be very important.
Turned out to be.
So we have E to That's basically a schwa or an umlaut. And that's gonna get you a very different tone quality as you ascend. This technique is called vowel modification. So this is a very, very common technique for operatic tenors. So if I go up and I don't want the note to really pop, I will do more of the So an example of that is this. Right, more neutral, a little bit of an Now I'm gonna go up and do a bright one. Very different tone quality. That's a nice even vowel. Oh. That's vowel modification right there as well. Wah, to get that more lush sound on that belt. Oh my God, she's so good. That tone quality is so beautiful. And I love she comes off of it with an aspirate abrupt. Yeah, that's such a smart way to descend. That's so brilliant. That's so good. So forgive me, my belting is not so great. But like I said, when your folds are fat right there, it's really hard to switch really abruptly and to get into that more lush sound as she descended. So she did what's called an aspirate abrupt. So she blows the vocal folds open with a sound, with an aspirate. Except she does it way better because she's fucking Whitney. But that belt sound and it allows her to go into that thyroid cartilage to get that lush sound. So she can go bam on the belt. She can go whoopsh, whoopsh, Mike Tyson, right? And then she just does that aspirate gradual. She has so much closure on the belt, so much closure. Boom, the aspirate gradual, right? The aspirate abrupt. She blows those folds open, puts them together again, but does a totally different technique where her thyroid goes from back to the belt forward for the second part of that. Really cool way to get into that. Adjustment. Woo! Okay, so one of the things that can happen when you get a little tense is your, I speak with retracted vocal folds. I just like the sound of it. But when you sing, if you put too much breath pressure behind it, what can happen is that your retracted false folds go closer a little bit. Very hard to avoid in the higher end unless you're masterful about your breath. What you see here in the first note here is what you hear is the false folds are coming together. The retract folds are not so retracted. This next one. She backs it off. Listen to this next one. Now, I'm not sure if that was on purpose. There is a rationale you could say that it was on purpose, because if you repeat the same note and it has the same volume and the same lushness, you could argue that it's too repetitive and there's no growing in the phrase of the song. Given how good Whitney is, it could be probably that it was on purpose. Even if it's not on purpose, the ability to adjust that quickly on the fly, that's incredible. Because it's a subtle thing. It's very subtle. Wait. What the fuck? What the fuck? I just got demonetized and I don't even give a fuck. Holy shit. That's not a belt. That's a belt. That's really well done. Different all day, all different singers. Look, Mariah's mic technique is absolutely exceptional. This is important. This is important. Sometimes it happens to be the case that you are just not in a place to sustain a note, right? It's so much harder to sustain a note than it is to touch it. So you have to respect that when that's where you're at, that's where you're at. And if you try to do it otherwise, you're going to splat. So this was actually, I like this from Mariah. And she uses mic technique to kind of exaggerate the effect as well. So, you know, that's the thing, is these artists have incredibly demanding songs. And so having that ability to work around it's really important. I love that. Very smart. Holy crap. Oh my God. Oh, that was nice. It wasn't a ballad, but it was nice. What? Okay, now we're getting into whistle on head. So. Nice. Very delicate. Very pretty. Obviously she was That's hard to do, so she's floating that's actually possible. you get these kind of almost these loud operatic kind of tone qualities sometimes, and then she can just like kind of, it's so hard to, when you go up, to maintain that sort of that flute-like quality, because it's so much easier to keep the folds together when you do that tilt for the thyroid cartilage. When you do that thyroid cartilage tilt, what's happening is those folds are stretching out, and so it actually really helps with those high notes. And you can use more power, but it will create that power, because when you do that tilt and the fold stretches out, there's a lot more breath pressure that kind of builds up underneath that. That's what creates that power, is that tilt. So to not have that tilt, but to keep the folds from blowing open, requires a precision of air and breath. I mean, it's really remarkable. The sound of her voice is gorgeous. I did not know Whitney had this going on in her head voice. That's kind of extraordinary. You can tell that as we get into the C6s, we do have, there's a it necessitates that kind of tilt. Holy crap, that's astonishing. I didn't throw that shit. There's no, what? There's no whistling going on. Oh, that is a whistle. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, listen, on the head voice, I gotta say, that's a hard act to follow up, but we gotta give it to Mariah when it comes to the whistles. I'm sorry. As cool as those are. Wow. How do you... A lot of people, they're like, oh, I did a whistle. Cool. I'm the best. I did a whistle. Mariah's like, ha, bitch, please. And she'll do like an entire scale. And on top of a harmony, which means you gotta be exact. It's rude, but wait, there's more. Would I call that a glissando? Hold on here. I would call that legato, but, Okay. Okay. I don't know why it says analysis right there. I actually have nothing. So I don't know enough about whistle register, alas. The assumption is that the folds literally form like you would a whistle, like, right? So I don't know if you've ever tried to whistle a scale or whistle on tune. It's not easy at all. It's not easy. And then to do it, to do it like as a harmony casually, because like, I don't know if you've ever watched a Mariah Carey recording session. She lays down tracks like that. She's fast, super fast. You had to do that. And prior to the advent of digital media and digital audio, you had to be extremely, extremely good or your ROI had to be massive, right? Because you don't have auto-tune. You don't have the ability to do pitch correction and time stuff. You don't have that. So you have to be really good. I would call that legato, but, you know. Okay. Okay. I just, man, like, again, the comfort of this, you know, like a lot of people, and maybe this is why people think she has vocal damage, but actually you'd imagine that whistle register doesn't because there's less contact with the folds. True, the folds are probably at their thinnest, but because the shape is round, you'd imagine it's actually not bad for the vocals and that there are probably other reasons why. So